Okay. So welcome everybody for our November event in Women in Artificial Intelligence Engage USA. So I'm going to start talking a little bit about us. Women in Artificial Intelligence is a volunteer-led nonprofit community championing inclusive AI and sustainable innovation. The Women in AI Engage USA's team's mission is to provide inclusive, effective AI programming that fosters engagement, communication, and community for all women and girls. We organize a series of monthly events like this one to engage and connect women in artificial intelligence community, encourage to pursue AI education, provide knowledge, resources, and empower confidence. So here is our team. I'm Aida Nunton, product program admin in the team. Also, today is joining us Gada. Thank you. Really, thank you to all the organizing team. Today you will see Gada something and Nalini, who are going to be working and who are going to be sharing the experience with today's session. Also, a special thank you to Buba Shubram, who is our ambassador for USA. I will show the rest of our organizing team in here. And like I mentioned before, you will see in these slides all the information on how to contact us. So if you're interested to join us as an entrepreneur, a partner, investor, or volunteer, here's our LinkedIn, website, and email. And for tonight, our topic is artificial intelligence and gender bias. Let me introduce our 4 speakers briefly before we start. We have Grainne. Grainne is founding data science lead at spoke.ai, B2B software that leverage NLPs to save time for teams. She spent several times as a data scientist working in fintech, building data products, including customer service chatbot, geolocation services, and models for money laundering and fraud detection. She's passionate about NLP, data ethics, and building a diverse team at the Spoke. Welcome. I don't know if we have Armielyn. Is she able to join?
I don't see her yet.
Okay. Let's introduce her. She will be able to join. We also have Laura Grisales Rendon. Laura is a lawyer, LL.M in information technology law. She's a student, PhD student, researching about transparency principles of the GDPR and automating decisions-making algorithms. She's also a scholarship holder on the Conrad, hard to pronounce this, another foundation. Welcome. And last but not least, Nalini Garg. She's an artificial intelligence and data engineer leader at Deloitte Consulting. She advises Fortune 500 clients in designing and implementing data strategy and modernization solutions. She's passionate about future of responsive artificial intelligence in life sciences and potential biases in decision making. She's also a certified yoga instructor and teach pro bono classes. So welcome everybody. I'm going to stop my presentation and give it to Nalini.
Thank you so much, Aida, for the introduction and for the last part. Maybe next time, rather than talking about women in AI, we can probably do a yoga class together if everybody's excited about that. Some rules of the road. This is a fireside chat, so we will be posting questions, pre-selected questions to our speakers, and then hearing their views around it. If you have additional questions, please feel free to post them in the chat. Once our pre-selected questions are covered, then we would love to hear from the audience and answer the questions. With that, I will kick it off with Grainne, if I'm saying your name right. So the first question that we have got is, and it has to be, right? Let's talk about what is gender bias and how is it introduced in AI and machine learning solutions. What are some of the examples that you have seen around the gender bias in your life and career?
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me. I love meeting with groups of women who are interested in the same thing as me, which also includes yoga. So next time, a yoga session for sure.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think so first my original background was in statistics. And if there are any of you here who've worked with statistics before, you know that bias in statistics is usually used to describe systematic error, with the key word there being systematic. So when we talk about bias in AI, what we typically mean is a systematic difference in how an algorithm makes decisions for one group over another, where these groups are defined by some protected attributes. So when I say protected attribute, I mean anything like gender or ethnicity or nationality or religious identification, basically qualities that people are often discriminated on. So gender bias is a subset of those sort of biases that exist. And I think one thing that's important to stress is that it's not quite like this statistical term where we talk about systematic error. So it can be where an algorithm is wrong, but it can also be where an algorithm is making decisions that are not exactly wrong according to its eternal logic, but it's actually just not something we would like in society to be the decision. So hopefully that will be a bit clearer once I describe some examples of where we've seen bias. And to kind of begin to talk about that, I will explain some common ways in which it can be introduced into AI. So the first, and the one that's I think most straightforward to think about, is if the data itself is biased or reflected of existing prejudices in our society, then the model can do no better but reflect that back to us. So this is a huge problem right now with these large language models that you see everywhere. So GPT-3, even models like Stable Diffusion, any sort of large models out there have been trained on massive data sets. And unfortunately, most of the data sets we have out there are biased in one way or another. So a very specific example of this is with Google Translate. So you may have all seen last year, there was this screenshot doing the rounds on Twitter, but basically it was showing a Hungarian to English translation. And Hungarian is a gender neutral language. So they don't have a concept of he said, she said, etc. And they have something, let's say it's like they in their language. And so what this screenshot showed was a phrase which in Hungarian meant sort of they are clever, they are beautiful. And the English translation of that was he is clever, she is beautiful. So without any other context, the translation algorithm inferred that they is clever must mean he is clever and beautiful must mean she is beautiful. And what's happened here, it's because these translation models are trained on massive corpuses of text over, the entire internet. And most likely he appears closer to clever than she, and she to beautiful than vice versa in that set. And that is just the way our society has developed, but we don't want our translation engines to then repeat that same error going forward. So that's one example of how bias can be introduced and where it can be seen. Another way bias can be introduced can be a little trickier to spot, and this is in framing the problem. So when you build any sort of model, you kind of have to give it an objective, something to maximize for. We do that by talking to it in maths, right? So it's not as direct as me talking to someone on my team and explaining what I want. And so there's a lot of opportunities there for what it to maximize for, not to match what our ethics as people who are developing models would like it to. And we have to be therefore very careful about how we frame the problem. One example, again, where this has gone quite wrong, which I found very interesting, was there was a study a few years ago that looked at STEM job ad postings, so advertisements for jobs within engineering, mathematics, science. And it discovered that they were shown far often to men than to non-male genders. And they were like, okay, why? And they realized there was an algorithm that was maximizing for the lowest cost per click-through rate for these ads. So actually, if both a female and a male, let's say, were shown an ad, they would both on average be as equally likely to click through. So you might ask then, oh, but why were they showing them to more men? And the reason was because women are more expensive, apparently, to advertise to. So this algorithm was maximizing, like I said, for lowest cost per click-through rate. And it was then ending up probably having more males in funnels for all these jobs, which then becomes a self-perpetuating problem. So I really like that example, as in, well, obviously I dislike it because that's not how we want job advertisements to be. But I like it because it shows how tricky it can be to foresee some of these instances of gender biases. And you really have to sit down and think about like how and where they're occurring. A little long answer, but hopefully that gave you a taste of what it means and where it can be seen.
Thank you, Grainne. I think that was a good conversation. I do want to add into this, and I was listening to this podcast a few days ago, and it was a funny example, to be honest, but I kind of like want to share it on this channel as well. So the podcast was about, there was some Harvard study being done where they were trying to design a program to recognize people, how beautiful they are, and or especially women. And the people who are trying to build in the solution, the inputs were actually from like, dominant male Americans who, like, for them, the idea of defining women is like more Latino style. They find them more beautiful. And I kind of feel like, it's obvious. It's an open topic idea. Basically, the idea of beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, right? So if your own biases, and if you're biased towards certain gender, if you're biased towards certain data set, definitely those kind of biases comes into your solution as well. And I believe people have to be mindful about it. So when we are building some solutions together, right, make sure we have the diverse group of people bringing in value, bringing in input into the data set as well. It kind of caught my eye and attention. It was like, why not share that with the other folks as well?
Yeah, I think it's such a good point. I always think about government, right, which, we really understand the value of having a diverse set of people building our laws and our way of life. Yeah. And it's something I think we can all agree about being passionate about. But the people working in tech are shaping our world just as much. So it's super important, like you say, that is those people shaping our world represent diverse peoples.
Thank you for that. So that makes our way to our second question. Our second question is, what are some moral ethical dilemmas associated with AI, and how can we enable more organizations to become conscious around ethical use of data? It was a little mouthful, so I'm going to paste it to the chat as well before answering. Actually, I'm going to take a first pass at this question as well. So here is the question. All right. So when we talk about AI, right, the key to every AI solution is data. And if we have good, unbiased, balanced data, bingo, you have hit the jackpot. Otherwise, it's garbage in and garbage out, which ties us to the problem of data ethics. Gartner defines data ethics as a system of values and moral principles related to collection, usage, and sharing of data. So sometimes when the data ethics violation get exposed and become big deal in public, and other times they just like very subtle and secretive. Right? Like algorithms suggesting higher interest rates for minority mortgage applicants, or lower lines of credit for women credit card applications, or the resume filtering that you mentioned earlier, right? And these violations and biases, whether small or big, are bad for businesses. And it can jeopardize their brand, draw regulatory actions, lead to boycotts, and destroy business value. There's a saying, it probably is a t-shirt quote from somewhere, but I've seen it so many times. Nothing is illegal until you get caught, right? And for most of the organizations, I believe this comes as a surprise. So what can we do about it? Some of the ideas that we have seen organizations putting this together is, I believe they are in crucial need of governance around it. We need to enable organizations to think about creative ways to create a data ethics council and have a thought leadership actively vocalizing and governing careful and responsible use of data to avoid any negative outcomes. After all, it's like promoting good and avoiding the bad, right? Other topics and other things that they can talk about is avoid being too single-minded on a solution perspective. Sometimes we think about, okay, let's get the solution out. That's the part of, that's what we have to do. That's the next step, but that it doesn't have to be. Rather than focusing on a solution, we should think about the journey itself, how we have come to the solution, what is the conclusion, right? And what are the steps that we have taken to come to that conclusion. That ties back to balancing the need of swift decision making. With today's world, everything has to be, the answer is, we have to get the answer yesterday. So rather than having this need of getting the answer right away, I believe what organization should do about is like proactively think about different ideas and solutions to put the data together. And then when the solution is coming their way, think about how this solution is going to impact the diverse crowd, how this solution is going to impact different genders of the society and whatnot. And also the representation matters, right? So in this data ethics council, we need to make sure we have people from different diverse sections, either to run ideas from, either to bring in creativity or different sorts of data collection points and whatnot, and enable them to give a transparent feedback as well. So those are some of the things that I believe could be a first start in terms of overcoming these biases into the solutions. Any thoughts from anybody else who would like to add? Okay, I think they're none then. All right. So did we, with that, we can...
Nalini, I actually have a question, but
Yeah.
I will leave it to the end. I don't want to interrupt you. I think it's better maybe if we finish the discussion and then at the end we leave it for people if they want to ask question or discuss anything.
All right, sounds great.
Thank you, Nalini.
Thank you, Gara. So with that, let's move on to our next question. And this is going to be for you, Laura. So how can data governance help to overcome challenges related to gender bias in data and other gender-related AI concerns? And what are some of the other kind of biases that could be there?
And thank you, Nalini, for inviting me. So data is a core part of developing AI, especially machine learning, and data governance is the strategy implemented to ensure that data is secure, private, available, and usable. So it regulates who can access what type of data and what type of data is under control, but it goes further than thinking about how organizations manage data to ensure that data gets to where it's needed and can be used in ways that benefit us and help us protect gender equality, but also in general fundamental rights, protect the rule of law, democracy, and advancing the SDGs, improve social welfare, and so on. So when we focus on data, we often think about the actual development of AI systems, but actual issues of data governance start before. So data governance includes the actions that must be taken, the process that must be followed, and the technology that supports them along the data lifecycle. So it involves establishing internal rules or data policies that apply to how data is collected, stored, processed, and disposed of. And it also involves compliance with external standards set by industry associations, government agencies, and other stakeholders. So the focus is not only the development of AI and the use of data in the development of AI, but rather the whole end-to-end process to tackle some issues around equity and justice. While AI brings opportunities and risks to individual fundamental rights and freedoms and democratic values, better data governance and policies can help mitigate these biases and even to promote gender equality. So this is made by managing risk more efficiently and improving regulatory compliance. In my research, I focus on transparent or contestable systems. And this question about the optimal level of transparency is open and difficult to answer from a technical point of view, but we can implement systems that ensure people the right to express one's point of view and the right to contest, so they can express if they believe that a decision or that an algorithm is biased. Contestability is the possibility of acting on automated decisions made by algorithms that by correcting or making suggestions to improve this AI process. Ensuring contestability from the early stages of softwares would allow human intervention to co-create algorithm performance and enhance transparency. Today, we have three main challenges in data governance that are algorithmic bias, lack of representation, in this case of women, but also in general of minorities, and accountability. And the principal concerns regarding AI, according to different guidelines and law, are unfairness, discrimination, and opacity. So we can link them to the concerns on data governance. So accordingly, the objectives that we have to achieve are fairness, accountability, and transparency. So first, algorithmic biases can lead to unfair and discriminative decisions that affect people's rights. So that's for sure. And this could be addressed by using technology strategies like contestable systems. But we would have a long discussion about the possible ways to address them from your point of view as software developers or the data scientists. The second challenge is that of representation. So we must insist that minorities are represented at the moment of testing the AI performance and of testing the AI, if the AI is biased or not. It will also help that people most affected by governance decisions are part of the decision-making process And we also need to ensure that we comply with external standards set by industry associations, agencies, etc. And the management of big data requires a clear regulatory framework that protects the right to privacy and a guideline that monitors how algorithms work, so that decisions are practical and can positively affect society. And finally, we need an international or global framework, a global approach of data governance. So some regulations in some countries are stronger than others, and internal cooperation will be beneficial even on the private sphere. So for example, we had the US and European Privacy Shield, which was replaced maybe 2 months ago by the Transatlantic Data Privacy Framework. So in the European Union, there is a stronger framework for protecting privacy laws because the GDPR is a pioneer legislation. And the Privacy Shield was just a way for US companies to adopt the GDPR and comply with the regulations of the European Union. But still, even in the European Union, where the GDPR was the pioneer legislation protecting privacy rights, there are not regulations indicating how to address AI gender biases. Even we are waiting for future legislation, the AI Act, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and they don't address this problem of gender inequality. That's it. I think as lawyers, as software developers, we have the obligation of think about how to give more solutions and to pay more attention to gender equality.
Thank you, Laura, for that.
Nalini, can
yeah.
I ask Laura something, please?
Yes, for sure.
So Laura, thank you so much for what you said. I just have a comment. So you mentioned one of the major approach to mitigate bias is to do some post-processing in the outcome of the machine learning algorithm or the AI algorithm to make sure it doesn't hurt minority. I think you mentioned something like this. So when like let's say that the algorithm, the AI algorithm now, it generated an outcome that might damage some minority group, and then we want to change this rule. Like, who created this rule? Who created this rule? Like, who should create the rule that we need to apply to the AI outcome to make sure it doesn't hurt minority, for example? I'm not sure if my question is clear.
No, like, are you asking who creates the rule to indicate that the data should be changed, or what?
No,
What
like who, like now, like let's say the AI machine or algorithm, it provides a specific outcome, like, and then for some people they might think this outcome really it's biased, it's not fair. But then for the other group, it might be fair. So like when you mentioned that we maybe need an international framework, do you think really we need an international framework? Because I think maybe fairness, or what's fair or what's not fair, might change across culture, across countries. So like, should we have an international framework that we apply to all AI algorithm, or should we have maybe customized framework that we apply to specific population or specific group of people?
This international framework is about the process of testing and the process of having human beings making the test about is this decision or is this AI being discriminative or is it biased or not? Because it's difficult to indicate what's the way to decide if this particular decision was biased or not. It depends on the group. It depends also on the test data. And also the privacy law couldn't say these decisions would be fair or unfair. We have to go to other laws depending on the topic that the algorithm is working on. For example, if this is about a recruiting program, we would have to refer to labor laws.
Yeah, and the laws change across countries. That's what I mean. So each country has its own law, and that's why this problem is hard, because we have so many laws for each application. We have like different law across countries, across cultures. And I just want to clarify, what do you mean when you said maybe we need an international framework? But I think now I got to your point.
Yeah, I mean more like international cooperation.
Okay.
Because it's internet, like data is collected in one country and maybe it's being processed in another country. So we need to have this framework of international cooperation and to know how data will be treated across countries.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
You're welcome.
Gara, my perspective on that is there's no one size fit all solution.
Yeah, there is no one,
It's,
and that's why it's hard.
yes.
It's a really hard
Yeah,
problem.
exactly. I mean, it's right now we're talking about the problem, right? It's taking us so much actual time to figure out that there is a problem and telling people that there is a problem, right? Let alone leave the solution outside. Like we don't know the solution, right? Right now we're on a stage where we're telling, let's talk about this.
You know, like the main problem, Nalini, is I think this is the major problem. The major problem is we do have bias in our word. Our word is biased, and AI is just a replication of the real world, and the data are biased. If the data are biased, then we should expect the machine to be biased. So if we really want to focus on solving this problem, we have to start from the data. We need to make sure our data are clean and like have good representation of everyone.
Yep, makes sense. Kara, do you want to take the questions now? I think we have a few questions popping up in the chat.
So do you want me to read the chat questions?
Yeah, if you have from the top.
I can do that. So let me just check. Let's see. I think Ida, she asked, why do you think gender bias is not covered in future regulations? Is it because we don't have enough representation in gender or minorities? I think this is a question for you, Laura.
Yeah, I think it could be that reason, but also maybe we are avoiding to address challenges that we are not technically prepared to address. Like it's difficult for policymakers and for lawyers to indicate how to avoid gender bias in AI. We are until now like trying to give concepts about AI, for example, and also about how to manage the risks of data and to classify data, which one is more risky for violating rights. So I don't want to think this is a conscious decision of not regulating gender inequality. But it could be also a reason that we need more women representing us or minorities.
Okay, thank you, Laura. And there is another question. Let me just read it. So how do we determine an appropriate goal for AI in terms of hiring diverse employees? I have heard of the idea that if the local demographics have 49% women population, then a college campus should have a college campus should have 49% women student. I think basically this person is asking what's a good goal of data, like what's the good representation, like for example, let's say for a woman in the AI algorithm to make sure the AI will be fair for the hiring diverse employee. And I think Maria, if you can speak yourself and ask the question, it might be better. So anyone of you, if you can ask her, like, what's a good goal for AI to have in order to make, let's say, a diverse hiring decision?
I can try to take a stab at it. In my mind, I don't think we can define a goal, like a percentage, that this is what you have to do to make sure your solution is not gender biased, right? There's some key features, and there comes the wonder of feature engineering, right? So we have to basically tune our algorithms based on the features that we define while doing the resume filtering. It could be based on different geography. It could be based on online versus offline tuitions. It could be based on different gender. It could be based on different skill set hiring needed for that job, right? And then tuning those parameters, that which ones are higher, which ones are lower, could lead to different results. And I think fine-tuning those parameters or hyperparameters are a crucial thing to lead to it. So there's no right and wrong answer into this. But for us to get to a solution which is gender neutral, probably like a hit and try here. Other thoughts?
Yeah, I think the ideal solution would be really to build an AI that doesn't look at this information at all, like doesn't consider gender or anything. So it hires people based on qualification. But this is something I don't think we can achieve, because at the end, like AI learn from the pattern in the data. And if the data is biased, we will have a biased algorithm. Like, as you said, there is no right or wrong answer. And it's a really hard problem.
Yeah, like I think just what you mentioned there about building an algorithm, right, that doesn't take in gender, this is something already that lots of people have tried to do. And there's always or often sneaky correlated variables with gender. So things like the infamous example of Amazon's CV parser, and they preferred CVs where the word women's was mentioned or men's was mentioned over women. So if you say I played on the men's basketball team in college, that was better than an identical CV with women's basketball team in college. So it learned sneaky ways to be biased. So that's a problem. I think what I have grown to think about this is, it's hard to pinpoint a particular percentage. There is this idea of equal opportunity, which really means that if you have any algorithm, the proportion of false positives and false negatives are the same across both genders. So what does this mean in practice? It means an equally qualified male is as likely to get hired as an equally qualified female. And a non-qualified female is equally likely to be rejected as a non-qualified male. But that's even assuming, right, that they get to a position where you're making this decision. Like most people have 22 years before that point where they are getting funneled in one direction that serves them up in front of that ad that they see for that job. So it really has to, like, it has to be from the very beginning that things are different and equal. And yeah, I also think what gets neglected a bit is diversity of experience. We're used to seeing single paths to success, because a lot of the people who we see around us who are successful belong to certain similar demographic groups, and they tend to follow broadly similar paths to success. So a high level of education, going to education straight after school, having children after working for several years. But actually, there's nothing to say that that's a predictor of success. And maybe somebody who goes to a school, like has different set of qualifications, or took 10 years out to have children before starting their career, or something else, may actually be as well qualified. So we basically have to experiment a lot, I think, and just be open to diversity in every facet, not just in gender, but in experience and qualifications, in everything.
Okay, yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Gaurav, do we have more questions? Otherwise, we have our fourth speaker now. We can quickly introduce her.
Give me 1 second. Let me check. I think we we covered all the questions from the chat.
Perfect. Hey, Armielyn, am I saying your name right? Please introduce yourself.
I'm Armielyn. I'm also in the AI side. So, and currently a data scientist. So definitely, I'm so excited with this. And yeah, I just got on because of the internet issues here. So yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I have my question for you set, and I'm going to paste it on the chat as well. 1 second. Yeah, so the question is, what are the best ways to combat gender bias in AI training data? And how can you also use AI to identify and eliminate gender bias? Thoughts around that?
Yeah, actually, it's a very nice question, because a lot of times we encounter a lot of gender bias in data. So what we do is really make sure that the data that we're working on is really a good quality, to make sure that it's balanced. And especially, like, for example, if we're working on a computer vision and there's a lot of images that we're working on, and we need to identify some either images that like women and men and so on, or any other kind of problems. So what we did is, the first part would be checking your data. So if the data is not yet completely good quality, you have to process it accordingly, and then from there you can make sure to eliminate any gender bias there. And also, if you can possibly work on a data set that doesn't need to have like involved with data or gender data or anyhow, but I guess start from checking your data. And how can you use AI to identify and eliminate? So from there, you can definitely see what solution you could do. But a lot of times what you do is really make sure our data is really, good before we process it completely in the model, because sometimes even if on the training side, it doesn't really generalize. So that's what we
do. So I think it boils down to data quality, right?
Yeah.
Garbage in, garbage out.
Yes, it's exactly like this: garbage in, garbage out. We have biased data. And so I think I have a question, like, so right now, like with the generative models, there is a lot of tools that we can use to create our own data set. Like maybe the solution, one of the solutions to solve this data bias is to start to create synthetic data. Let's say if my data set doesn't have enough female representation, or like, I don't know, like old people representation, what we can do is that we can create female data, for example.
Yeah, I think it depends on the problem. If the problem doesn't really need to be like, it's more of a gender, or but yeah, again, it all boils down with the quality of the data. Because if it doesn't have any female representation in the data sets, then we can really say that the model would be generalized. But what we could do is add more data set, or either way, we could do another way to make sure that there would be no gender I guess, it would be focusing on the other part, not the
Like
gender
make it
side.
more gender neutral.
Yeah, because sometimes models sometimes really, I wonder a lot about that. They're a model that we predict something, and yet we can really determine on the side of the women, mostly it's on the men's. It's kind of hard to really say what was really like the generalized, or what would be the overall thinking about the female representation. So what we could do is add more, or either way, if we could do another way to focus on, think of other features that doesn't need to have like gender, if that's the case. So yeah.
There are also techniques, Kara, like everybody must have heard about undersampling, oversampling, right? So
Yeah.
there's some of those things that we can also use. But the question here is, sometimes we also use AI in generating the data, generating more data, right? So how much we are confident on generating new data to actually solve another AI problem?
Yeah,
It's a chicken and egg situation, I believe.
yeah. I mean, the reason I ask is because, like, I think a few weeks ago I read an article where a group of people, like, they wanted to build like a voice recognition system, and then they had like the majority of the voices that were male voices, so they created synthetic like women voices in order to have some balance in the data set. Like I think the percentage like was 90% of the data set was male voices and just 10% female. So one solution they explored that, okay, how about if we create synthetic voices, female voices? And I don't think this is the best solution, but I think maybe we need to start really to think about how we can solve this problem. There is a data imbalance issue, and how can we use AI itself to solve this problem?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. But I remember when we had this project, like it's very involved with computer vision, but really doesn't have any images for female. So what we did was, I guess the other team also did the same thing, like a synthetic images of women, because we didn't really have images for women, that data set. So I was really, what we did was, a synthetic, and then, I guess AI has this feature that you can really add more data set from that, and you can augment the data and then add more. So what we basically is do the same thing, like adding more synthetic data, or even with the others, even though it doesn't really like the actual, but at least we have this additional data for that part. So there's a lot of times that we will encounter imbalanced data sets. So we can do oversampling or other methods to really make sure that your data would be balanced, and at least the distribution between the features are really distributed. So yeah, that's very much.
It sounds like at the end, it's up to us. I mean, at the end, we're controlling the data sets. It's not like when you said, how to help artificial intelligence to solve the problem. Really, I don't think it's going to be that way. It's the opposite, because we are the one who are controlling the data sets. We are the one who are working on the algorithms. It is.
Ida, is like our world is biased. So unless we solve bias in real world, we really cannot solve it in AI. So it's a very complicated issue. Like the data set we're using to build AI system, they are biased data set. So like we have to start from like the data set, the garbage in, garbage out, as Nalini said. If our data is not balanced, if it's not fair, then we shouldn't expect the method or the algorithm to be fair.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the best way is stop the production of that garbage that we're then putting in. I mean, there are some hacks, of course, to avoid that garbage, like smelling up our AI. But it's good to already stop putting garbage out there. And I think already mentioned some of the ways that AI can help with this, but even small ways like prompting someone to use they when gender is not necessary in a sentence, or like a little writing bot like Grammarly or something like this, helping you be more inclusive in your language. I personally need an AI bot to tell me to stop saying hey guys. I still say hey guys a lot. It's an Irish thing as well. And just to nudge me. And I think like that and education will really help stop producing all this garbage bias data.
That's a great example like that, because I myself too, sometimes I say, hey, like, hi everybody, but sometimes like, hey guys, yeah, it's a very common thing, and it's difficult because it's you get used to it, right? So you learn, and it's part of the thing. It's kind of like getting a bad habit of things.
Yeah.
How do you remove the way that you're used to talk, because whatever reason, you say that expression, you learn that expression, and it's part of you then. And then how do you change that? You remind me of one thing, that there were like a tendency that putting things with E instead of with A or O, like female or male, and everything is with E at the end. So it's kind of like neutral. But I think it's hard. And that was coming from, younger generation, very young generations. It's like, I wonder, then instead of, and this is something that I heard in one Hispanic channel. But I wonder, it's like, how easy it's going to be changing our own languages, not to say "oh" at the end, make it a masculine, referring to the masculine word, and to be inclusive. I changed that, since at least myself, I was raised and learned through school. When you're talking about generic, including men or women, you end the word with O, and O is masculine. So that's I think hard to beat.
You have to unlearn a lot of things that we have been doing so far.
Yeah, and like we really
Yeah.
shouldn't expect from AI to be better than us. Like, we're biased. We shouldn't expect AI to not be biased. And I just want to mention one more point. So I do think really like the AI community is a bit lazy, because if you think about it, like whenever there is any problem or any application, we all tend to just use one data set. Like, let's talk about MNIST data set. Like, we all know this data set. Like, it's been used by, like, I think thousands and thousands of AI researchers, because they don't want to collect their own data set. Like Deep Lesion, it's another medical imaging data set that's collected in US, and it's more suitable for like the US population, but it's been used by every single country in the world. It's used by people everywhere. Like, why? Like, I feel like countries, they should start to work to create their own data set that works for their own population. It's better than just relying on, like, I don't know, all the data that's coming from one country. That's like, I'm not sure if my point is clear. Like, we should start really to push like countries, to push community over the world to collect data set that works for their people.
But my first question on that, it will be, why is that happening? I mean, I'm not thinking is, you mentioned laziness, but I'm not so sure what's the reason to do that. Maybe because it's more accessible, easier.
Maybe I like, you ladies, please feel free to interrupt. But I think maybe like, because like US like has more resources, like researcher here, they have more resources and ability to collect large data sets than other countries. But like, if we really want to like, if we want to generate an AI that's less biased, like the entire, like everyone have to work on this. Like every country, we need to work together to create a data set that has contribution from everyone, not just from the US population, for example.
And that takes effort, Skara,
Yeah.
right? So sometimes, like tying back to my point that I raised earlier, it's in, finding a balance between getting a swift decision versus really cognitive about what kind of data I'm using to get to that decision, right? Do I want to take the pros of getting the solution tomorrow, or should I wait for another week and get
Yeah.
that great data set to get to the unbiased solution that I'm looking for?
Yeah. So like deep lesion, it's one of the most well-known medical imaging dataset. It's collected at NIH here in US. But the thing is, I remember I reviewed a paper 2 weeks ago. Like there is a group of researchers from like Abu Dhabi. It's a Gulf country, and basically the demographic of the patients, it's different there than in US. But those people, they build their model on a data set that's used here, built here, and they want to deploy the model in hospitals in like Emirates. Like, why? Why don't you use data from your own patients? And this is just one example. Like, I think we're relying on few data sets that's collected by like small group of people. I don't know the reason, but I think really we have to make an effort. Like all countries have to work together to create data sets that represent their own population.
Yeah, actually, I could add more to it about the, having these data sets. Because sometimes I guess on this side of the healthcare, I'm not sure if it's really like so open in terms of the data sets. Because I think like I've worked on some projects before in terms of patient data and either way, but they don't really give it to the people, especially on us like machine learning engineers or data scientists. They really don't provide health data because of this confidentiality. But what we could do, that's why I guess that's other way around. Like the reason why there's only few data sets for patient data or healthcare data because of the confidentiality of the data sets. And then another thing would be, I can agree with, having an open source data sets, or at least that is really like inclusive for all, because sometimes when we're looking for data, or for us in the Philippines, we kind of don't look, kind of looking for images really match our skin color. Because whenever we look at the data from the other, like the US, it's kind of different from the images that we're looking for. So that's other way around, like the problem on using sometimes the model isn't really like predicting on what problem that we're trying to do because of limited data set. So I can agree of adding more, but yeah, just checking whether these data sets can be really provided in the public, or either way there's another way to do adding more data sets.
Well said. Yep. I
Unfortunately,
know we are almost at the top of the hour. I would like to thank you, everyone, for especially our speakers, Laura, Grainne, Armielyn. Thank you so much for joining us today and had this wonderful chat. And for all the participants who came and dedicated their 1 hour talking to us, listening to us, and then asking questions. Anything, Ida, Gara, you want to add?
No, I just want to thank you both, Ida and Nalini, and I want to thank our speakers and everyone who attended. Thank you so much.
yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I think the time got short, but hopefully we have another opportunity in the future to talk more about this.
Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks. Have a good one.
Thank you. Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye. Thank you all.